Hey everyone, CoolKid here. With the release of the Shadowgrapher update, Warframe was graced with 3 new super bosses, which can be battled in a new node called the Guilty. For those who don't know, super bosses are enhanced versions of specific boss fights, and they are significantly more difficult than their standard counterparts. In exchange, they offer up unique cosmetic rewards, like some dollies, glyphs, and even player titles. The Guilty contains 3 enhanced boss fights, all being souped-up versions of the Protea bosses. We have the Prime Vanguard, the Dactolyst, and the Hunhullus, who all must be fought in a row to complete the mission. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this node is the hardest mission in the entire game, as it introduces a slew of new mechanics to each boss fight that makes them much more challenging. So, in today's video, we're going to talk about how each boss works, strategies for taking them down, and how to go from skill issue to skill solution. Real quick though, I do want to make a note about how this video is structured. As you've probably noticed, I haven't been showing any footage of the boss fight, and I am going to continue to avoid doing so up until the moment I have to show it. The unique elements of this fight were so much fun to discover myself for the first time, so I'm tweaking this video's format a little bit to preserve that experience for the people who want it. We're going to talk about the overarching mechanics of all 3 fights, then the normal version of a boss, and then the Guilty version of said boss. And only then am I going to show footage of the Guilty fight. This provides 2 key advantages. 1, I can explain the Guilty variants much more easily if I establish how the fights normally work first, as it gives me a basis to build on. 2, this will let people learn as much as they can without spoilers, and give them a clear point to jump ship if they want to preserve the experience. Do note that this video is going to be from the perspective of a solo player, as the accolade glyphs require solo play. Ideally by the end of this video, it should be much easier to net yourself that sweet Savior of Protea title, so without further ado, let's rock. Being a super boss node, the Guilty shares several mechanics with the other super bosses. As such, I'm going to show footage of those bosses as I explain this stuff, both to prevent spoilers and because they're still relevant. So, first and foremost, this boss fight is subject to Archon modifiers, which means a few things. First, enemy level scales with squad size, increasing by 25 for each ally present. Second, there are no self-revives, and last gasp's duration is reduced by 2 seconds with each use. The bleed-out timer is also reduced each time a player goes down, to a minimum of 5 seconds. If a player dies in this fight, they cannot be brought back unless Nidri is used, and if all players die, then the mission fails. Third, Spectres, on-call crew, and air support charges are all disabled during these boss fights. Strangely enough, the 3-minute restore cooldown does not seem to apply in this fight, instead using the normal 1-minute restore cooldown found on the Steel Path. Beyond the Archon modifiers, several attacks inflict an enhanced magnetic proc. This magnetic proc does the typical magnetic stuff: drains 20 energy per second, scrambles the HUD, and prevents natural shield regeneration. But it also has an additional mechanic: total ability nullification. As long as an enhanced magnetic proc is present, all active abilities are dispelled, and no abilities can be cast, including Operator mode. You can also be hit with this proc while in Operator form, which prevents transference back into the Warframe until it wears off. These magnetic procs last for 3 seconds, and only specific attacks inflict them, so I'll bring it up when relevant. It's also important to note that these magnetic procs can be blocked by certain sources of status immunity, but only partially. The energy drain, HUD scramble, and shield regeneration penalty won't apply, but the ability nullification will still go through. Our next overarching mechanic is Cascading Rebellion, which is the Guilty's version of Cascading Fragmentation. Once the mission timer crosses 10 minutes, the Cascading Rebellion debuff will be inflicted, dealing damage once every 10 seconds or so. For every minute afterwards, the debuff gets stronger, dealing progressively more damage until the mission is won or the player dies. When it comes to the bosses themselves, they are all immune to armor stripping, and they all have status reduction. This means that they can only gain 4 stacks of any given status effect, with the only exception being corrosive if you're using green shards. Not that it would matter because the stacks won't reduce armor, but I know somebody is gonna actually me in the comments if I don't mention it. Because of these limitations, armor stripping methods aren't that helpful, and status weapons struggle much more than crit weapons. Each arena also has 2 spawners present, one for ammo and another for energy, which refresh frequently. These are both incredibly useful, as their respective resources are pretty rare otherwise. The Energy Orb spawner makes Energize very effective in these fights, as it can massively boost your energy gain with each pickup. It's also important to note that each time you enter a new boss fight, your Tauron strike will begin rapidly charging. This only works once per fight, and if you already have a charged strike when the fight starts, you won't be given a free one after casting it. There is one major exception to this though. The Vanguard will begin charging your strike every time you kill a Prime, which makes Tauron strikes extremely spammable in that fight. As for the Dactolyst and Hunhullus, you get one freebie and that's it. Okay, with all the overarching stuff out of the way, I can finally explain how to actually unlock the node. If you don't want this spoiled for yourself, jump ahead or leave now. If you would like a hint, enter the cathedral and then locate this book sitting on a bench. The short poem in this book gives several hints as to how to unlock the mission node, so if you want to work solely off of that, feel free to have a crack at it. If you're still here, I'm going to spoil exactly how to unlock the Guilty. Equip Uriel, approach the Lotus in the Dark Refractory Room, and use the bow emote in front of her.
So, Devil, you choose the harder path. As always.
Yeah, for some reason you need Uriel to unlock this node, despite him not even having an accolade for clearing it. Not really sure what they were cooking with that one. This unlocks a new option in the bottom right of the Protea Rebellion mission select screen, and when checked, it reveals the node for the Guilty. Unlike every other super boss, this node throws you straight into the boss fight, so there's no time spent collecting eyes or hacking terminals. This does mean that the initiative buffs from normal Protea missions are off the table in the Guilty, so keep that in mind. Now that we're through all that, let's get into each individual fight, starting with the Vanguard. To make something clear, I am going to be reusing a lot of material from analyzing the Prime Vanguard to explain things for this section, as I already put in the work to make it, and I see no point in redoing it all. I will include some new lines for things that have been changed since that video's release, but if you've already seen that video, you can jump to this timestamp to go straight to the Guilty variant, or this timestamp to go straight to the standard Dactolyst. Still here? Alright, let's get into it. Okay, with the cool intro out of the way, I want to start with some high-level tips for the boss fight, and then we'll get into the individual Vanguard members. So, upon loading into the boss fight, you'll see each Vanguard member JoJo posing in the sky. While this may just seem like aura farming at first, it actually does convey useful information. The order they appear in the sky is actually the order you'll fight them in, going from left to right. This is also the order they'll perform revenge attacks in, but we'll cover that mechanic a little later. You'll fight one Vanguard member, then two, then one, then two again, along with a final stand phase on the Steel Path where you fight all 6. On that note, be aware that very few minions spawn in this boss fight. As such, activating conditional effects like galvanized mods and weapon arcanes is quite difficult, so I recommend bringing damage that isn't totally reliant on kills to activate. In a similar vein, the lack of minions makes orb generation difficult, so frames that rely on effects like Equilibrium can also struggle to produce energy. Likewise, frames that rely on spamming ability casts for survival can struggle unless they have an independent form of energy generation. As for the Vanguard themselves, they're all immune to armor stripping, and even worse, they all have status reduction. This means that any given status effect is capped at 4 stacks, including DOTs, which is hugely detrimental to most status weapons. While you can definitely make it work, status hose type weapons generally struggle in this fight because of the 4 stat cap. Hard-hitting weapons that inflict strong status effects, like a Scythe Heavy Slash proc for example, do still work quite well. Generally speaking though, crit weapons dominate this boss fight, as they don't have any restrictions like status weapons do. The Vanguard frames are also members of the Anarch faction, so they take bonus damage from electric and impact and reduced damage from radiation. I also want to note that the basic attacks of most Vanguard members deal pretty low damage if you have any amount of DR, so you can safely face tank a lot of their gunshots to help you focus on dodging the dangerous stuff. If you don't have any DR, this isn't really a great idea, but even just an adaptation can be super helpful. Alright, with all of that stuff out of the way, let's get into the individual Vanguard members, their attacks, their counters, and how to best handle them. First up is Ashe, the group's primary damage dealer. Ashe's attacks are fairly dangerous, with one of his abilities even insta-killing players it connects with. Fortunately, all of his attacks are counterable if you know what to look for, so let's go over them now. As a baseline, Ashe wields the Hiku Prime for ranged combat and switches to a Nakana Prime when up close. The melees in this fight are generally more dangerous than the ranged weapons, so do keep that in mind. Whenever Ashe isn't actively using an ability, he'll select the respective weapon based on his distance from the player, though these attacks can be easily avoided by taking cover or staying mobile. For our first ability, Ashe will split into 4 shadow clones that mimic his basic attacks. During this attack, the shadow clones will slowly dissolve, and if they reach full dissolution, Ashe will teleport behind the player and begin attacking them. This attack actually used to be an instant kill, but after the Shadowgrapher update, Ashe just engages the player with regular melee strikes. Dealing enough damage to the real Ashe will cause him to be knocked down, which ends the attack and despawns the clones. As a pro tip, if you put a waypoint on Ashe, then it'll remain on him when he uses the attack, which allows you to find the real Ashe immediately. If Ashe has any DOT effects when he casts this attack, they'll still damage him, which can also kick him out of the attack early. You may not want to do this though, as the shadow clones can be used for conditional buffs like galvanized mods, so it can be helpful to deliberately avoid the real Ashe so that you can build up stacks off of his clones. Ashe's next ability is Smokescreen, where he throws a bomb at his feet and turns invisible. I say that with air quotes because Ashe is still very much visible, emitting a constant plume of smoke. This ability is pretty rare all things considered, and it's not that dangerous, especially if you have him waypointed. Teleport, Ashe's next attack, is signaled by him raising his Nakana above his head before disappearing. After a brief delay, Ashe will appear behind the player and attempt an overhead strike for big damage. This attack can be pretty easily rolled away from, but if you're fast enough, you can actually damage Ashe as soon as he appears behind you, which knocks him down and ends the attack early. Ashe's final ability, Blade Storm, is one of his most dangerous. Ashe will float up into the air with an icon of an eye above his head. All players within Ashe's line of sight will gain a mark every 3 or so seconds, and at 3 marks, a shadow clone will teleport to that player and insta-kill them. When Ashe starts this attack, you need to run and hide as soon as possible. Breaking line of sight will cause Ashe to cancel the attack after a few seconds, so get out of there quickly unless you want to spend a revive. This insta-kill can be blocked by camping in operator form, using overguard, or even just having your shield gate ready. This attack used to target companions as well, but nowadays it just goes for players. Now that we're through all of Ashe's regular attacks, it's time to talk about a mechanic I haven't mentioned yet, Revenge. After defeating a Vanguard frame, that frame can reappear in subsequent encounters, aiding their allies with a unique revenge attack. Fortunately for us, Ashe's Revenge is pretty easy to deal with. All he does is spawn in 3 shadow clones, who raise their swords before rushing at the player. This attack can be easily avoided by jumping or rolling out of their path, as each Ashe clone travels in a straight line. Ignoring this attack entirely can be deadly, but if you're at all lucid, then it shouldn't be a huge problem. Next up is Ember, who serves as another damage dealer for the group. Many of Ember's attacks inflict a fire DOT, along with large hitboxes that can be difficult to avoid. Many of her attacks also stagger or knock down, which makes her especially deadly. Ember wields a Sycoris Prime for ranged combat and a Glaive Prime that also gets used in ranged combat, with the Glaive dealing a good chunk of damage on hit. Ember's first ability, Fireball, is pretty self-explanatory. Ember launches a fireball at a player, which explodes on contact and leaves a lingering patch of fire. A direct hit from the fireball will knock down, and any contact with the fire patch will inflict a heat proc. This attack comes out fast, but travels pretty slowly, so if you're struggling to avoid it, then keep your distance so you have the maximum amount of time to dodge. Other than that, just remain aware of the fire patch and you should be good. Next up is Fire Blast, which works basically identically to an Arson Eximus Blast. Ember will release a ring of fire that knocks down and inflicts a heat proc on hit, but both the knockdown and the heat proc can be avoided by rolling through the ring. Breaking line of sight will also prevent the attack from connecting, so if you're in a bind, you can quickly duck behind a rock to stay safe. Ember's last attack, Inferno, is easily her most dangerous. During this attack, Ember floats up into the air and gains high damage reduction while channeling. This causes orange rings to surround allies, along with flames that slowly populate said ring. Once a ring accumulates 4 flames, a meteor will come down from the sky, striking the targeted ally for both a heat proc and a stagger. These meteors deal pretty high damage, which carries over to the resulting heat proc. To dodge the attack, you'll actually want to stay low to the ground while keeping an eye on the flames surrounding you. As soon as you hit 4 flames, roll, as the meteors have a fixed path once they spawn. The reason I suggest staying low to the ground is that the meteors fall from the sky, so if you're airborne, then the meteors have less distance to travel before they hit you, which gives you less time to get out of the way. In the past, this ability would target companions as well, but as of the Shadowgrapher, this has been removed. You might still see it in the background footage because a lot of it's pre-patch, but know that nowadays this attack only targets players. Now Uriel can actually do this boss fight, thank god. Now, while Ember is channeling Inferno, she can be kicked out of the attack with enough damage, but the DR she receives during this ability makes that tricky. Fortunately, Ember's chest will glow red during this attack, and attacking this weak spot will up your crit tier and avoid this damage reduction entirely. If you're close enough to do so, kicking Ember out of Inferno is a very good strategy, as it both ends the ability instantly and deals a lot of damage to her. If she's too far to reliably damage her chest, then focus on staying low and rolling in time with the meteor strikes, which should keep you alive. Lastly, we have Ember's Revenge attack. During this attack, Ember spawns near the player and begins channeling a massive fireball. After about 10 seconds, she'll throw the entire sun at the floor, dealing big damage and knocking players down. This attack's hitbox is telegraphed by glowing rings emanating out from Ember while it's being channeled. But be aware, the hitbox comes out instantly on contact with the floor, while the visual effects kind of lag behind. Fortunately, this revenge attack is pretty easy to avoid, as Ember doesn't move at all after she spawns. So long as you aren't anywhere near Ember when she throws the fireball, you'll be safe, so just get to the other side of the arena before that happens. Volt is somewhat similar to Ember in that he deals high damage and inflicts lingering DOTs, but he has more tricks up his sleeve than that. Volt is especially tricky to pin down, and his electric procs can spell a quick death if you aren't careful. Volt's electric procs will also cause affected allies to damage other allies within 3 meters, so if you get hit with an electric status, then stay away from your teammates. In ranged combat, Volt wields a Corvus Prime, making him the only Vanguard member to wield an art gun, and in melee range he whips out the dual Karis Prime. These basic attacks are pretty dangerous in comparison to the rest of the cast, but fortunately, they're also pretty easy to avoid, as Corvus has a slow projectile and the swords can be avoided by staying at a distance. Volt's first ability, Shock, is pretty straightforward. Volt will fire a laser out of his hand, hold it briefly, and then sweep it horizontally. If you're hit by this laser, you'll take both a stagger and an electric proc, which can easily set you up for another attack. Fortunately, this attack is easily avoided by jumping, so if you see Volt fire the laser, then jump before he drags it over you. Volt's next ability, Speed, is an interesting one. While active, Volt will rapidly teleport around the arena, stopping to fire a shot from his Corvus between teleports. If approached in this state, Volt will attack with very fast melee strikes, which is extremely dangerous. During this attack, your best bet is to stay at a distance and keep your eyes on Volt as best you can. Slows from things like cold procs can also be very useful, as they make Volt much easier to track and dodge. Volt's third ability, Electric Shield, is probably his most infamous. Volt spawns a front-facing shield that blocks all range damage, though melee attacks can still go through it. Because Volt tries to face the player, this makes him effectively impervious to ranged attacks, but there is an easy way to counter this. Each corner of Volt's shield sparks, and shooting a sparking corner will break the spark. Once all 4 corners have been shot out, the shield breaks, which also inflicts an electric proc on Volt, stunning him and dealing damage. The weak points on Volt's shield also count as headshots for charging Incarnants, which is nice. The shield can be combined with speed, which makes Volt even more dangerous, though the stun from breaking the shield can be used to interrupt speed and give you an opportunity to lay on damage. Volt's last ability, Discharge, works similarly to its player counterpart. Volt will briefly float in the air before casting the ability, inflicting all players and companions in range with both an electric proc and the discharge effect. Being near other allies will cause you to share damage from the discharge effect and the electric proc, so if you do get hit by this ability, then stay away from any teammates or companions. Fortunately, this attack is pretty easy to dodge, as the radius is quite small and the attack is entirely line of sight dependent. Just get away from Volt when he floats up into the air and you should be good. Lastly, we have Volt's Revenge attack, which is easily the most dangerous revenge of the entire fight. During this attack, Volt will appear in the middle of the arena before floating up into the air and firing electric lasers in all directions. Huh, that looks familiar. Contact with these lasers will inflict both high damage and a stagger, which in combination with the high number of lasers creates a very dangerous play space. Unlike most other revenge attacks, you can't easily avoid this attack by just moving away from the casting frame. You can try to weave through the lasers if you've got the nerve, but this attack is most easily avoided by either hiding behind a rock or standing in the center of the arena underneath Volt. Of course, with this being a revenge attack, you'll also be dealing with the other Vanguard members at the same time, which makes this difficult to juggle. My advice is to stand beneath Volt if it's safe to do so, and if it's not, then move from cover to cover while staying away from any active primes until the ability ends. Next up is Mesa, who is kind of a joke, honestly. I genuinely wonder if this frame is bugged, because she's so easy compared to the rest of the cast. She's supposed to be a damage dealer and disabler, but she's really not that hard to deal with. At range, Mesa will wield the Okjigara Prime, and up close she'll use the Redeemer Prime. Her Redeemer is actually pretty interesting, as it knocks down on hit, so getting into melee range of Mesa can be kind of a challenge. Mesa's first ability, Peacemaker, spawns a targeting cone in front of her. Any allies within this cone will be subject to a hail of bullets from her regulators, and if no players are in this targeting cone, then she will attempt to rotate until she can see them. Now, you can just stay at a distance to avoid this attack, but if you get in close, you can actually melee Mesa, which will knock her down and end the ability early. You can block her bullets to push up on her before delivering the knockdown, or you can come in with an aerial slam to safely knock her on her ass. This can be a good window to attack Mesa if you're using your melee, or you can just sit outside of her attack range and wail on her. This attack is really easy to avoid, and it also deals pretty low damage if you have any form of DR, so it's really not that threatening. Mesa's next ability, Shooting Gallery, is very different from its player counterpart. Similar to Peacemaker, Mesa will spawn a targeting cone, though this time she'll equip her Redeemer. After a brief delay, Mesa will fire the Redeemer, and any players caught in the cone will be knocked down and drop their currently equipped weapon. This attack is avoided in the exact same ways as Peacemaker. You can stay at a distance, or melee Mesa out of the attack for a knockdown. You can also use a melee to block the attack, which will avoid the disarm. While this attack is pretty fast, Mesa can't move the targeting cone once the ability starts, so it's not super difficult to avoid if you see it coming. That's it for her abilities. No, seriously, she only has 2 abilities, and they're avoided in the exact same way. I honestly wonder if she's just bugged and not casting certain abilities, because as it stands, she feels like half a boss compared to the other Vanguard members. Lastly, we have Mesa's Revenge attack. During this attack, Mesa will spawn in and begin firing a hail of bullets down onto the play space, which is signaled by several lines drawn from Mesa to her target. Note that Mesa will spawn lead lines first, which are a more washed out yellow, before firing the shots that actually deal damage, which are a more vibrant yellow and are also accompanied by a sound effect. This attack doesn't deal a ton of damage if you have any amount of DR, and it can be easily avoided by staying out of her targeting lines. Next up is Protea, who serves as the group's tactician and support. Many of Protea's abilities revolve around deployables that she places, which makes her very different to fight than the other Vanguard members. All of Protea's deployables are also object health, so damaging them can be difficult if your weapon relies on critical hits or status effects. In ranged combat, Protea wields a Velox Prime, and when up close, she uses the Okina Prime. Protea's first ability, Grenade Fan, can make use of both of its forms just like players can. For shield satellites, Protea throws down 4 orbs that will latch onto herself and her allies, slowly granting shields as long as they're attached. If the frame shields are full, then Overguard is granted instead. These orbs can be destroyed to end the effect early, both when on the ground and when attached to an enemy. Pro tip: gas and electric procs can destroy the satellites if they're inflicted on the enemy directly, as they deal area damage. These drones should be dealt with quickly, as they can provide a lot of overguard to enemies if left unchecked, especially during the final stand phase. Protea's second ability is the other half of Grenade Fan, Shrapnel Vortex. For this attack, Protea marks 3 small zones with a green highlight. Standing in these zones rapidly applies slash procs, so avoid the highlighted areas and you should be fine. Next up is Blaze Artillery, which is Protea's most dangerous attack. On cast, Protea spawns 3 turrets that will lock onto nearby players and begin firing lasers that inflict the heat status. These lasers inflict high damage, and their heat procs also hurt, but fortunately, they do have targeting cones, so as long as you're outside of those cones, you should be safe. A big reason why this attack is so dangerous, aside from the high damage and 3 turrets, is that Protea will be fully actionable after casting Blaze Artillery, so you have to keep track of both Protea herself and the turrets. The turrets can be destroyed like Protea's other deployables, but they have object health, and quite a bit of it at that, so destroying them can be kinda tough. I personally use my amp to break these things, as it packs a solid amount of base damage, but that's just me. Like with her shield satellites, AoE status effects like gas and electric can also destroy the turrets after they spawn, though Protea has to remain close for this to work, and the damage has to be quite high. Ultimately, take whatever approach works best for you, but this attack is easily her scariest in my opinion. Protea's final ability, Temporal Anchor, isn't super dangerous, but it is extremely annoying. On cast, Protea will become invincible, leaving a hologram of herself behind. As long as this hologram is active, Protea remains invincible, so priority number 1 should be destroying this Temporal Anchor. Problem is, the anchor has object health, and a lot of it, so it's a total pain in the ass to destroy. If you successfully break the anchor, then Protea will become vulnerable again alongside a knockdown. If you don't break the anchor fast enough though, then Protea will detonate and damage nearby players before rewinding to the anchor, which heals her. Like with her prior abilities, AoE status effects can help break the anchor if Protea remains close, but it has so much health that they often can't break it alone. Pack a weapon with solid base damage for this one, as it's a bullet sponge for sure. Lastly, we have Protea's Revenge attack, which isn't really an attack at all. Instead of some kind of damaging ability, Protea will instead return to help her allies, spawning a dispensary that links to the lowest health Vanguard member on the field and heals them. A green line is drawn from the target to the dispensary, so quickly locate and destroy it to stop the healing. Like every other deployable, dispensary has a decent amount of object health, so make sure to have a weapon that's good at dealing with deployables. I rely on my amp with the 5 prism, and I'll go ahead and show on screen the setup that amp uses. This is my go-to for dealing with Protea's bullshit, so if you're struggling to break her deployables in time, this might be helpful for you. Finally arriving at our last Vanguard member, we have Caliban. This frame inflicts a lot of staggers and knockdowns, on top of Tau procs that set up for status effects from his allies. As of the Shadowgrapher, Caliban is able to apply multiple stacks of the Tau status, up to 10. To be perfectly honest though, I don't really know what the point is, as I've never taken a wayward status effect from an attack that wouldn't normally inflict one anyways. At range, Caliban wields a Protea Prime, which causes lightning bolts to rain down on nearby allies after a shot connects, so if you're with a team, then spreading out can be helpful. At close range, Caliban wields the Prime, which isn't really all that remarkable. Caliban's first ability is Razor Gyre, which causes him to go Beyblade mode and damage nearby players. From what I've noticed, he seems to have several patterns he can take, from a straight line, to zigzags, to moving in a circle. He might chase the nearest player, but to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. This attack deals damage, rapidly applies the Tau status, and staggers on hit, so it's best to avoid it. Staying high up in the air is an easy way to avoid this attack, but you can also just run across the arena to stay safe. Caliban doesn't go that far from his initial cast spot, so even though his hitbox is quite large, it's not super hard to get away from him. Caliban's next attack starts with him marking a wedge on the floor that quickly fills up. Once full, Caliban slams the ground and releases Sentient Wrath, which knocks down players caught in it. This attack deals a lot of damage and also inflicts a Tau proc, so I would recommend respecting it. Fortunately, this attack can be dodged by being airborne, so it's pretty easy to avoid. Caliban's third ability, Lethal Progeny, actually works similarly to Ember's Inferno. Caliban will assume a summoning stance, raising his hand and gaining high damage reduction. If Caliban doesn't take enough damage to interrupt this ability, then he will summon one of his 3 sentient allies, which we'll get to in a second. Now, like Ember, Caliban can easily take enough damage to knock him down by attacking a weak spot, his hand. This takes a lot of bonus damage, though it doesn't seem to chunk his health quite like Ember's weak spot does to her. You may want to actually let Caliban summon his minions though, as they're the only other way to trigger conditionals in this entire fight. Similar to his playable counterpart, Caliban has 3 summons: Conculists, Ortholysts, and the Summalist. All 3 of these summons function the same as their regular enemy counterparts, but the Summalist has the additional effect of boosting Caliban's shield recharge. I actually think this attack is really interesting, as you can very easily stop Caliban from summoning his allies by attacking his hand, but you very well might want to let him call his gang so that you can get your conditionals going. Caliban's last ability, Fusion Strike, is not that great, to be honest. Caliban fires 3 lasers that converge in front of him, and contact with the lasers deals high damage and inflicts a Tau proc. Unlike the player version of this ability, those hit don't take a secondary explosion or lose any defenses, and there's no lingering zone after the cast finishes. This ability is pretty fast, so it can be kind of tough to avoid, but as is the case with many of Caliban's abilities, remaining airborne is a pretty easy way to stay safe. Lastly, we have Caliban's Revenge attack, Razor Gyre 2 Electric Boogaloo. For this attack, Caliban picks a part of the arena and just Razor Gyres through it, going from one end of the room to the other. This attack shares the same properties as his regular Razor Gyre, but it's honestly super easy to avoid. If you spot him coming, then just move out of his path and you'll be fine. Alright, now that we've made it through every individual Prime, I want to explain the approach to Final Stand. This last phase is Steel Path exclusive, in which all 6 frames will come down to fight you at the same time. I'm gonna be honest, this phase is total chaos, but I'll do my best to make it more manageable. My first tip is to save your tower on strike for this part of the fight, as it's really valuable to kill as many frames as quickly as you can. Thara is especially good for this, but all of the strikes work quite well in this final phase. You will get a free strike after 20 or 30 seconds, but the Vanguard members often spread out by then, so it can be best to hold on to your strike from the prior round to make this easier. When I spoke about this phase in analyzing the Vanguard, my main point of advice was to kill Ashe as quickly as possible. Now that he doesn't have his Shadow Clone insta-kill, I think that Ember should be priority number 1. Her Inferno's ability to track you from anywhere on the map is super dangerous, so it's good to take her out quickly. Beyond that, who you take out next is up to you. Ashe is still a large threat because of Bladestorm, so it can be valuable to get rid of him fast to get that ability out of play quickly. It's also a good idea to focus on Protea, as her shield satellites buff all other frames with Overguard generation, on top of her Blaze Artillery dealing a lot of damage. Volt is also a sizable threat, but he can be pretty easily stalled by staying away from him, so as long as you're aware of where he is, then he shouldn't be that much of a problem. In my opinion, both Mesa and Caliban are pretty easy, so I typically save them for the end. You should still ensure that you're avoiding their attacks as best you can, but they don't have any abilities that can take you out as quickly or easily as the others. Now, I know you want me to address the elephant in the room, but I need to explain some other things first. Mainly, revenge attacks are active throughout the entirety of this fight, instead of being added to the rotation as Vanguard members are defeated. Only the currently active Vanguard members are excluded from the revenge rotation, as you might expect. Revenge attacks are also done instantly, meaning that as soon as one ends, the next applicable Vanguard member begins theirs immediately. These attacks are also the primary source of enhanced magnetic procs, as no non-revenge attacks inflict them. Several revenge attacks also possess new properties, so let's go over those now. Volt's is the simplest, as his lasers just inflict the magnetic proc. Ember's nuke now charges much faster, has a much larger area of effect, and inflicts an enhanced magnetic proc. Mesa fires roughly twice the number of bullets, making her active for much longer, and her shots inflict the enhanced magnetic proc. Well, they do when they actually hit you, as it seems they very often fail to connect for some reason. Ashe's Shadow Rush is much faster, and the clones have much more aggressive tracking. Caliban's Razor Gyre bounces around the room multiple times, and each time he bounces off of a wall, he will target the nearest player, rushing them in a straight line. Now, I would assume that Ashe and Caliban are supposed to inflict the enhanced magnetic proc, but at the time that I'm writing this, both of these attacks just do nothing. It is completely meaningless if Ashe or Caliban's attack connects with you. No damage, no stagger, no magnetic proc, nothing. I'll be sure to update the pinned comment with their properties if this ever gets fixed, but for the time being, you don't have to worry about them. The last revenge attack is Protea, who seems to be nerfed in this version of the fight. Her dispensary doesn't heal nearly as much of the affected frame's health per second, which I'm guessing is to compensate for both its increased frequency and the addition of our 7th Vanguard member. Now we can talk about this version's X-Factor. Trinity Prime joins the fight, and she is very different from every other member of the Vanguard. For one, Trinity is present in every single round, meaning that she is a consistent issue that needs to be addressed. Fortunately, to compensate for this, she has no shields and is much squishier than the other Vanguard members. As you might expect, Trinity's goal is to buff and protect her allies, so it's very important to take her out as quickly as possible. Because she's so easy to kill relative to the other primes, she's also a solid way to activate on-kill buffs, which this fight kinda lacks in its non-guilty form. Alright, let's talk about what Trinity actually does. Trinity's basic ranged attack involves shots from her Lex Prime, which are surprisingly weak. She also engages players with her dual commas when up close, though they aren't that special. What really makes Trinity threatening is her abilities, which we'll go over now. Trinity's first ability, Well of Life, starts with her marking a victim. This victim can be a player, their companion, or a summon, and if a non-player entity is marked, then it will be suspended in the air. This victim will spawn a large zone around themselves, and if any Vanguard members are in this zone, they are completely immune to status effects. Even worse, if a Vanguard member dies while in this zone, then the marked target is killed in order to save that Vanguard member, healing them to half HP and granting about 5 seconds of invincibility. Do note that players marked by Well of Life will not be killed if this happens, but companions and summons will be. Fortunately for us, Well has a very clear and simple counter, amp damage. Shooting the marked entity with an amp will immediately dispel the well, and for non-player targets, this also restores their normal movement. You can also clear well from yourself by entering operator form and shooting your Warframe, so keep that in mind. Well of Life is a very dangerous ability, as it makes the Vanguard much harder to kill and can even save them from death. If well has been cast, then try to clear it as soon as possible, as it can be the difference between a finished round and several additional minutes of combat. Trinity's second ability is Link, where she draws a wire between herself and the nearest player. If Trinity takes damage while Link is active, this damage will be transferred along the wire to whoever she's linked to, though this only transfers damage and not status effects. The easiest method to avoid Link is to simply keep your distance, as the ability has a pretty short range, but there is another method that's quite interesting. You see, if Trinity shares damage with a player, that damage is not shared instantly. Instead, the damage has to physically travel along the link in the form of a link orb. This means that you have time to get away before the orb reaches you, or alternatively, you can actually shoot the orb to stop the damage in its tracks. The orbs do have object health, so they can be kinda tough to kill if you lack base damage, but this lets you interrupt the damage sharing while staying up close. Personally, I just retreat whenever this ability is active, but the orbs are a solid alternative if you can't do that for any reason. Trinity's final ability, Blessing, is the most important to stop. Whenever this ability starts, a message will appear on screen, warning that Trinity is preparing to bless her allies. During this ability, Trinity will assume a wind-up stance, gaining high damage reduction across most of her body. If she doesn't take enough damage to interrupt this attack, she slams the ground, healing herself to full and all of her Vanguard allies by half of their maximum health. Just like Ember and Caliban, this ability has a weak spot that can be targeted to end it early: Trinity's hand. During her wind-up, Trinity will raise her hand into the air, and it will glow pink. Damage dealt to this hand receives a flat 200% crit chance increase, and upon taking enough damage, Trinity will be kicked out of Blessing alongside a knockdown. This ability has the potential to massively prolong the Vanguard fight, and because of Cascading Rebellion, it is very important that does not happen. If you see the notification that Trinity is channeling Blessing, drop everything to find and stop her, as the consequences of it being cast are catastrophic. Okay, now that Trinity's been addressed, I want to talk about a few changes that the other Vanguard members receive. There may be more than what I list here, but these are all the ones that I've noticed. For one, all Vanguard members use their abilities much more often, so staring contests where they plink you with their basic attacks are much less common. On top of that, there are a few unique changes, like Ember's Inferno, which charges significantly faster. Ember also typically casts an ability as soon as Inferno ends, so be ready to roll through a Fire Blast. Protea's Blaze Artillery light staggers on hit in this fight, meaning that movement isn't restricted, but the player will put their hands up, preventing shooting and reloading. Volt's shield now takes 2 shots per weak point to break, and the weak points can regenerate if the shield isn't broken fast enough. Most interesting of these, in my opinion at least, is Mesa, as she goes from the most boring Vanguard member to a massive threat in the Guilty. Unlike every other Vanguard member, Mesa is pinpoint accurate with her Okjigara Prime, and she can hit you regardless of distance. As far as I've noticed, she even seems to focus the player if distractions are present, making her especially hard to avoid. While her Okjigara normally don't deal that much damage, the level increase in the Guilty makes them way more likely to actually kill you, and she can hit you consistently from any distance. If Mesa can see you, she can hit you, and if she can hit you, you're probably gonna die. Adaptation can help mitigate this like in the non-Guilty version of the fight, but her damage is so much higher here that it isn't nearly as effective. For the final stand phase of this fight, I target Trinity first just to make sure that she can't heal everyone, or eat my dog for that matter. After that, I normally focus on Mesa to ensure that she doesn't shit me to death. Ember is still very important to get rid of quickly as well, as Inferno's global targeting is very dangerous. Beyond that, who you kill next is really a matter of preference. I try to go for Volt because his speed makes him a nuisance, then typically Ashe and Caliban next as they're less threatening in my opinion. Protea is often the last one to die, as the increased ability usage makes her spam Temporal Anchor, which, as you might remember, heals her. I just let her kinda do her thing until I have no other threats to manage, as the one-on-one fight is pretty easy if you know how to deal with her deployables. The Dactolyst is a large sentient spider thing, and its fight is split into two phases, a flying first phase and a grounded second phase. Do note that the Dactolyst has a headshot hitbox, which takes significantly more damage than its body, but it's quite difficult to hit on account of it being so small. The boss also moves around a lot, even changing elevation to dodge attacks in the first phase, making it much harder to hit. It's still worth going for, but it can be a struggle to actually nail the boss in the face. Also, strangely enough, the Dactolyst can be armor stripped in the first phase, though it becomes immune to this in the second. For its basic attack, the Dactolyst spawns a barrage of energy projectiles that have light tracking, dealing tau damage on hit. These projectiles deal decent damage, but they're quite easy to dodge so long as you keep moving. The Dactylyst's first ability, and by far the most common, is Energy Bola. The Dactolyst fires a spinning bola at the player, which rapidly makes its way to where the targeted player is standing. Once it arrives at its destination, the bola stops all lateral movement, grows to be about twice as long, and spins in place for several seconds. This ability can easily be dodged by jumping over it, but if the attack connects, it rapidly deals heat damage and applies the heat status. This isn't too tough to avoid, but it hurts a lot if you get hit, so keep an eye out for it. As the Dactolyst takes damage, it will unlock new abilities, and it uses these abilities with escalating frequency. The first ability to address is Firewall, where a giant wall of lasers spawns on one edge of the map. This wall will then slowly sweep through the arena, and contact with its beams will inflict a high damage heat proc. Fortunately, the wall has an opening that can be crossed through to avoid taking damage. The wall can also be jumped over, but this is very difficult, as you only just have enough height if you don't have any parkour mods. Parkour speed shards, Praetos, and even things like Synth Reflex make jumping the wall far more consistent, so if you're struggling to dodge it, I would recommend that approach. Keep in mind that Firewall spawns on the edge of the arena, so I strongly recommend avoiding the outskirts so you don't get immediately vaporized. The second Phase 1 attack is Tailspin, where the Dactolyst hovers in the air and spins its tail in a circle. The tail then fires a hail of explosive rounds, dealing blast damage and knocking down. The Dactolyst will alter the radius of this circle to try and intersect the player, so moving back and forth isn't that effective for dodging this attack. The best option I found is to jump up and away when the sweep passes. You can also stand directly beneath the Dactolyst and rotate with the tail to stay ahead of it, but that can be kinda risky. The final Dactolyst attack is Reinforcements, where it summons a batch of 5 sentient units. These units are an assortment of Battalists and Conculists, and they spawn in groups of 5. These summons are actually hugely useful, as they can be used to activate on-kill effects like Galvanized mods. They aren't brought in super often, but whenever they do show up, I recommend torching them as fast as possible. This both stops them from being a threat, and builds stacks for any conditionals you might have. Once the Dactylyst's first health bar has been burned through, it will collapse to the ground, starting Phase 2. This phase keeps all of the Dactylyst's Phase 1 attacks, with the only exception being Tailspin, as he can't exactly hover to do that. The Dactolyst also gains several new attacks, including a basic melee stomp that it will employ if the player is too close. The first and most frequent Phase 2 attack is Laser Sweep, where the Dactolyst fires a heat damage laser out in front of itself, sweeping it across the ground. Any ground hit by the laser is marked with a fracture effect, and after a brief delay, each fracture explodes into a plume of heat damage along with a stagger. The easiest way to avoid this attack is to simply never be dead on with the Dactolyst. If you're standing directly in front of the boss, then this attack can hit you quite easily, so standing off to the side is an easy way to stay safe. This attack can also be dodged with a roll, as the laser's path starts underneath the Dactolyst, giving you a brief moment to react and escape. For our next attack, the Dactolyst spawns 2 Expulsors, which begin tracking the player. This tracking is signaled by a thin lead line, and after a delay, the Expulsors will fire a beam that is extremely hard to dodge. Fortunately, the Expulsors themselves can be destroyed, and the lead lines make it very easy to track down their location. The Expulsors do have object health, which makes them annoying to take out if you lack base damage, but it's not so much that it's oppressive. Now, you can try to roll to dodge the lasers, but this isn't a reliable strategy in my experience. Not only do the lasers fire near instantly once the tracking phase ends, but the Expulsors can also stagger their shots, hitting you in succession instead of all at once. I'd focus on destroying the expulsors as soon as they spawn, and only resort to rolling if you have no other options. The next Phase 2 attack is Enhanced Stomps, which starts with the Dactylist letting out a cry and energizing its feet. It will then stomp the ground repeatedly, releasing waves that deal damage. This also seems to be a pseudo-rage state, as I've noticed that it casts Laser Sweep and Expulsors in quick succession during this attack. The main way to avoid this attack is to simply remain airborne, but in combination with Firewall, it can quickly get overwhelming. As far as I'm aware, there's no way to end this attack early, so stay off the ground while you dodge the other attacks, and you should be okay. The last Phase 2 change involves the Dactylist summons, which are changed from Conculists and Summolists into Brachiolists, Ortholists, and Typholists. The Brachiolists are great for conditional buffs, but as they float, they can be kind of annoying to hit. The Ortholists aren't a huge threat in my experience, but the Typholists will randomly hit you with a cross-map WWE top rope slam that hurts like a bitch. Typholists are also quite tanky compared to the other minions, so I recommend chewing up the weaker sentients to build conditional stacks, and then blitzing the Typholists so you don't have to deal with them. As this phase goes on, the Dactylist will become increasingly desperate, using its abilities more often. This results in longer enhanced stomps phases, more laser sweeps, more frequent firewalls, and even more expulsors spawned per cast, going from 2 expulsors at a time, to 3, to 4 at max. This desperation mechanic makes the boss significantly harder as the fight goes on, so remain alert and try to burst it down as fast as possible. The Guilty variant of the Dactylist comes out swinging with a crucial change. You have to fight both phases of the Dactylist at the same time. The Veor Dactylist is the airborne first phase, and the Straddle Dactylist is the grounded second phase. Both of these have access to their normal movesets, but with one key exception. The Veor Dactylist has access to Expulsors, which is normally a Phase 2 attack. When it comes to individual attacks, the main difference is that many of them nullify. Energy Bolas nullify on contact, and because both bosses can shoot them, there's twice as many in play at any given time. Tail Sweep now nullifies, Enhanced Stomps nullify, Firewall nullifies, and Expulsors also nullify. Basic attacks, Laser Sweep, and the explosions from Laser Sweep all do not seem to nullify as far as I can tell. Both bosses can also call for reinforcements individually, and it will always be the Phase 2 batch of enemies, meaning that you can have twice the Brachiolists, Ortholists, and Typholists on the field. On the bright side, the Brachiolists are still very easy to kill, making them great food for conditionals as well as Last Gasp. Firewall and Expulsor are very interesting attacks in this fight, so let's talk about them now. In addition to its stagger and heat proc, Firewall now nullifies, which makes contact with the wall certain death. The heat proc deals enough damage to insta-kill most frames in one tick, and the magnetic proc in tandem with the nullification makes regenerating shields impossible. Fortunately, there are now 2 gaps in the wall instead of only 1, but they are quite narrow, so any off angle can cause you to get clipped. Attempting to jump the wall also carries a lot more risk now, as failure to clear it will result in, at minimum, a shit ton of damage. Even more frightening, Firewall now sweeps the arena 4 times in quick succession, which can be done in several patterns. Pattern 1 has all 4 walls come from the same direction, Pattern 2 has the walls bounce back and forth between alternating sides, and Pattern 3 has the walls spawn from each direction. This means that you have to clear this borderline insta-kill 4 times in a row, while at the same time dealing with 2 bosses and their minions. Because of this fact, I implore you, above all else, to not stand at the edges of the room, as this can cause the firewall to spawn on top of you, killing you pretty much immediately. In a shocking turn of events, Arcane Ice is actually very good for this fight, as it prevents the heat proc from Firewall. You'll still get staggered and nullified, but Arcane Ice takes the situation from a guaranteed death to, ow, that really hurt. The aforementioned parkour boost items, like yellow shards, are also extremely useful for clearing the wall reliably. Expulsors function similarly in this version of the fight, but with a key difference. They deal very little damage. Instead, they serve almost entirely as magnetic proc generators, with their damage being fairly negligible unless you get shot by several in quick succession. The scary thing about expulsors is that both bosses can spawn them at the same time, meaning that you can have up to 8 expulsors active at once. This makes it extremely difficult to destroy them all before they fire, especially if you're dodging firewalls at the same time. The most reliable way to stop the attack is to just shoot the expulsors like before, but if need be, sometimes you just have to face tank it. You shouldn't ignore the expulsors while they're out, but if you're trying to dodge more dangerous attacks, the best option is often to just eat the nullification. The final mechanic for this fight is one of the most sinister. The bosses can revive themselves. If you down one variant of the Dactolyst and fail to kill the other in about 10 seconds, the downed Dactolyst will get back up and heal to half HP. This makes the fight much harder, as you can't 1v1 a Dactolyst for terribly long before their sibling pulls itself out of the grave. The goal is to kill both Dactolysts in quick succession, but because of the desperation mechanic, each boss gets progressively stronger as their health decreases. To be perfectly honest, if you have the DPS, I think it's a perfectly viable strategy to burst down one Dactolyst just to take it out of action. You'll obviously need to kill both of them within 10 seconds to actually end the fight, but focusing on one Dactolyst to temporarily remove it can make the fight much more manageable for a time. On top of that, the revived Dactolyst only has half HP, so it's much easier to kill once it comes back. I'm gonna level with you all real quick. I think that Double Dactolyst is the hardest boss of this gauntlet, and it will likely filter you several times before you really understand it. My most important pieces of advice are these. Equip Arcane Ice, avoid Firewall at all costs, and don't be afraid to face tank expulsors if you're dealing with other attacks. The Hunhullus is our final Protea boss, and in my opinion, it is by far the easiest. This hulking humanoid functions similarly to the Eidolon bosses, with 3 Synovia that must be destroyed to make the main boss vulnerable. 1 Synovia is present on each ankle, and the third is on the boss's chest. Yes, these 2 things count as 1 Synovia, it's a little confusing. These Synovia are immune to status effects, but they take double damage and double critical damage, so that's another point in favor of crit weapons. After a Synovia is broken, the boss's main health bar becomes vulnerable to damage. While vulnerable, no other Synovia can be broken, with all damage going directly to the boss's health. As you might expect, the boss can be headshot, but that's not its only weak spot. In the middle of the boss's forehead, there's a large eye that can be hit, which takes bonus damage and also adds a flat 200% increase in critical chance. This weak spot lets you smoke the boss extremely fast, so focus on it as much as you can. Also, as a pro tip, you can use the Hunhullus's head to charge Incarnants even when it's invulnerable, which can be helpful if you run out of Incarnant charge while breaking a Synovia. This boss has several attacks to be aware of, but the most important one to watch out for is Marrow Ticks. The boss will shoot 6 flares from its legs, which burst into an enemy called a Marrow Tick. These Marrow Ticks will slowly work their way towards the ground, and once they're close enough, they'll dive bomb players and explode. Marrow Ticks can be shot to destroy them, which counts as a headshot for the purposes of conditionals and Incarnate charge. This lets you build conditional stacks super easily, and it also makes charging Incarnates a breeze. When a Marrow Tick is killed, it leaves behind a grapple point that's identical to those found in normal Protea missions, and up to 5 can be active in total. When grappling, the player is completely invincible, and after reaching the grapple point, the player is granted a magazine of void damage ammo. Unlike most elemental ammo sources, this void damage can apply to weapons that can't normally receive elemental ammo buffs, like Incarnate forms. It's also worth mentioning that there's been a long-standing bug where grapple points make players status immune for the rest of the mission on use, and this includes the grapples in this boss fight. I'm going to mention whether or not an attack inflicts a stagger or status effect as relevant, but note that it very rarely actually matters. So, aside from getting a damage boost, the main benefit of these grapple points is that they keep the player off the ground. All of the Hunhullus's attacks target the ground, so as long as you have one grapple point, you can just chain grab it to be completely safe. I'm still going to explain how each attack works, especially because it's relevant in the Guilty version of the boss fight, but know that in the standard version, they can be all but ignored. The first attack is Laser Sweep, which starts with the boss dropping 3 grenades across the middle of the arena. These grenades leave lingering heat zones, which sort of forces players out to the edge of the room. After these zones are deployed, the Hunhullus will fire a laser from the eye on its forehead, sweeping this laser back and forth across the safe ground that's still present. The boss will typically move its laser through the outer edge first, and then bring it in towards the inner edge. This attack can be avoided in two ways. You can move in and out to dodge the laser, or you can bullet jump straight up. There's also a third way that I'm pretty sure is unintentional. The heat zones spawned by the grenades do not consistently deal damage. I have only been heat procced by them a single time in all of my testing, and they normally just don't do anything. I'm not sure if this is because the zones only deal damage via the heat status or what, but at the time that I'm writing this, you can just stand in these zones to avoid the attack. The second attack to deal with is Grenade Stomp, which starts with the boss raising up one of its legs. After a brief delay, it will slam the foot down on the ground, and it will also fire its laser around the foot, sweeping it in an arc. If hit directly by the stomp, players will be knocked down, implying they aren't status immune already. After the stomp connects with the ground, a circle will appear on the floor, and it will rapidly fill up. Once full, an aftershock is emitted, staggering nearby players and launching several grenades across the area. These grenades deal pretty high damage and explode in a sizable radius, so jumping straight up is a good way to avoid them. Whenever you see the stomp coming, the easiest avoidance method is to just run to the other side of the room. If a grenade is coming your way, then a bullet jump can dodge it with ease, so it's not too much to worry about if you're paying attention. The final Hunhullus attack is Floating Barrage, which starts with the Hunhullus floating up into the air. Wow, this video's riding his ass. Once it reaches its apex, it will begin dumping grenades into the middle of the arena, which stagger and inflict heat on hit. These grenades also leave lingering zones, but much like the laser sweep attack, these zones don't currently deal damage. The edge of the arena is completely safe during this attack, which makes it no threat if you're so much as awake when it starts. Just move to the edge of the room and lay on damage. It is incredibly free. Once all 3 health bars have been depleted, the Hunhullus will enter its second phase. This phase takes place entirely in Arcwing, with both the player and the boss being surrounded by sentient drones. If the player moves too close to these drones, they'll shoot out energy tethers, slowing the player and preventing them from leaving. The boss only has 2 attacks in this phase, with the first being another laser sweep. The boss will fire a laser from its head, sweeping it back and forth, going high then low, or low then high. This attack is not a threat at all, as you can just move up to avoid it. The second attack starts with the boss assuming a channeling stance, spawning 4 red orbs around itself. If these orbs are not destroyed in time, the boss will start absorbing them, and each time an orb is absorbed, a high damage pulse will be released. If all 4 orbs are destroyed in time, the boss will take half a health bar in damage, which is pretty sizable. This phase is extremely easy, even for this boss, as you can just lay into its head without much resistance. The eye weak spot is still present here too, so if you fly straight up to dodge the laser sweep, you can hit it with ease. As long as you have a decent arc gun, this should be pretty quick, so just shoot the orbs when they spawn and you'll be good. The Guilty Hunhullus is the easiest of the 3 bosses in my opinion, but that doesn't mean it isn't a threat. The first thing I want to note is that all laser sweeps now inflict the enhanced magnetic proc, but as far as I've tested, no other attacks do. This makes avoiding the laser top priority, as it's often the most dangerous thing present in any given attack. The second major change is the addition of giant Coralists, whose spawn is signaled by 3 giant beams of light, with each beam spawning its own Coralist. These Coralists fire tracking projectiles that deal a lot of damage, and they slowly float up into the air, which makes them harder to hit. The Coralists can't be killed by traditional attacks, instead requiring void damage to be harmed. The void damage can come from an amp or a grapple point's void ammo, but Zanta's Whisper doesn't seem to work. The Coralists are extremely dangerous if ignored, and the boss can have up to 6 of them active at a time, which gets very overwhelming. If you see the beams of light, get ready to dust the Coralists as fast as possible. They don't have a ton of health, so they're fairly easy to kill, and they are way too threatening to be left alone. The final major change in the first phase is that Merotic grapples are only usable once, despawning after the player launches off of them. This forces the player to think much more carefully about when they're grappling, and it also makes efficient use of your airtime a must. Because the grapples are so much more infrequent, you'll be grounded for a lot more of this fight, which makes learning the attacks much more important. Phase 2 of this fight is very similar to its non-guilty counterpart, but with a few changes. The first major change is that the laser sweep and the orb explosions both inflict the enhanced magnetic proc, but they're so easy to avoid that it doesn't really matter that much. The second and much more impactful change is that the drones at the edge of the arena will shoot at the player, which is done in 3 stages. The first stage tracks the player, the second locks in the firing pattern, and the third fires lasers from all participating drones. These lasers are fired in 2 patterns, which are avoided in similar but slightly different ways. The first pattern involves 3 lasers locking on and firing, which is done once if the boss is at full health, and twice if a health bar has been lost. The second pattern activates if only 1 health bar is left, and it involves single lasers rapidly firing at the player, chaining several times in a row. To be honest though, none of this matters if you have Amisha. Amisha's first ability, Watchful Swarm, blocks all damage in this phase, and even the nullification effects don't dispel it. As long as you have Watchful Swarm active, you literally can't die, which makes this phase a total cakewalk. If you pack a solid arc gun, like the Mausolon for example, then you'll be fine. Now that we've explained all of the boss mechanics, I want to go over some universal strategies that should work regardless of your Warframe. Do note that, from this point forward, I won't be showing any more footage of the Guilty fight to prevent spoilers. Everything I'm going to talk about in this section does still apply to the Guilty, but I'm going to be using footage from the standard versions of each boss fight. With that clarified, let's get into it. First, and most importantly, this mission hands out Tauron strikes like candy, so use them. I know I mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, each time you enter a boss arena, your strike will rapidly charge to full, and each time you kill a Vanguard member, you also get a free strike. Considering how strict the 10-minute cascading rebellion timer is, spamming your strike is a very good way to get through bosses quickly. Whole rounds of the Vanguard can be cleared in 1 cast, and you can even completely skip the Dactolyst fight using a strike. Thara is the best strike for this mission in my opinion, as it deals insane damage and requires virtually no aiming. If you prime the boss with viral and lay on damage as the barrage is ongoing, it is almost impossible for them to survive. You may want to place status duration on your priming weapon though, just to make sure that the viral status effect doesn't expire during the casting animation. While I think that Thara is the best of the strikes, the other focus schools still have their uses. Xenaric's Lorak deals a lot of damage, and the energy from Wellspring makes it much easier to recover from a magnetic proc. At the same time, Lorak is pretty annoying to aim, and if you're getting mag procced too frequently, then the energy bonuses don't really matter. Vazarin is incredible for survivability, with Protective Sling and Guardian Break being phenomenal. Vazarin's main struggle is that, when nullified, you can't enter your operator, so you can't use the main strength of the school under those circumstances. Vazarin's Nidri is also incredibly good in squad play, as it lets you revive dead allies, which is something nothing else can do. In exchange, Nidri has the worst upfront damage of any Tauron strike, though its damage sharing mechanic is very effective against the Vanguard. Naramon does have some value in this fight, but it's honestly not much. Vexoric is pretty strong, especially with priming, but it doesn't outright nuke bosses like Thara and Lorak can. Beyond that, melees just aren't very good in this fight, as the Hunhullus and the Veyor Dactolyst can't be hit by them without a lot of jank. On top of that, the headshot damage bonus is much harder to leverage using a melee, which often makes kills much slower. The strike is decent, but if you ask me, there are just better options. Unairu is in a pretty bad spot for this fight, honestly. Both Magnetic Flare and Caustic Strike do nothing against any of the bosses. Kagran's damage isn't terribly high, and Tempered Benison's defense strip is also useless. You can leverage things like Poise, but overall, I'd recommend a different focus school for the Guilty. Beyond the focus school, weapon choice is incredibly important in this fight. I find that high crit weapons are the best for all 3 bosses, though it's also good to have a source of viral, as it boosts the damage of weapon hits and Tauron strikes considerably. Electric is a strong option against the Vanguard, but they take reduced damage from radiation, while the Dactolyst and Hunhullus take bonus damage from cold and radiation, but reduced damage from corrosive. Because enemies are immune to armor stripping, on top of the 50% reduction in damage against 2 of the bosses, I would recommend avoiding corrosive entirely in this fight. Viral and Blast are the winners here if you ask me, as Viral boosts damage considerably, and Blast is able to deal a lot of damage through detonations. Kills-based conditionals are in a bit of a weird spot in this mission, as you certainly can activate them, but not consistently enough for constant uptime. As such, I recommend having a source of base damage that isn't reliant on kills to activate. Primary Bulwark and Cascadia Flare are both excellent for this, as they can be activated without a kill requirement and grant huge boosts in base damage. As all of the bosses have headshot hitboxes, Acuity mods are also extremely powerful in this fight, provided you can actually hit the enemy in the head. That segues nicely into my next point. Scourge is incredibly goated. Scourge serves as a fantastic primer when modded with Viral and Status Duration, and on top of that, its headshot bubble mechanic makes enemy heads much easier to hit. This is especially helpful against the Dactolyst, where the headshot hitbox is so small it makes me think I'm playing Rainbow Six. Scourge also has a very useful property when used against the Vanguard. The bubbles will trap their basic attacks, preventing them from shooting you. The only exception to this is Volt, as he holds his Corvus Prime too low for the bubble to catch it. Still, this makes the basic attack of almost every Vanguard a non-issue, which is especially good against Mesa. If you're going to use Scourge, you'll want a strong damage secondary, and for that role, I highly recommend Dual Toxicist. Both the Incarnate Charge and Frenzy mechanic play very nicely with Scourge's headshot bubbles, and on top of that, the Carnage Rain perk grants a 33% condition overload effect for free. As a secondary, Toxicist can also take advantage of Cascadia Flare, giving it a huge bump in base damage for very little effort. The Toxicist also has great hybrid stats, meaning it can inflict a lot of critical hits while also scoring heat procs consistently enough to maintain Cascadia Flare. If you'd like, you can also build into blast damage and relegate the heat procs to either your primary or a companion. Do note that your companion will spend a lot of time being dead in this fight, so they aren't a super reliable source of, well, anything. Melees don't matter a ton in this fight if you ask me, so my main recommendation is to run Melee Kareen. This arcane is super helpful for slowing down the Vanguard, which makes their attacks much more telegraphed and easy to avoid. It can also be used to slow down the reinforcements in the Dactolyst fight, giving you some breathing room. On the topic of utility, Praetos is incredibly helpful in this fight, as both Evolved Ascension and Vaulting Leap make clearing Firewall much easier. While I generally recommend against relying on your melee, I will admit that it can be very useful in the Vanguard fight. Slam builds are quite effective on account of their high damage and huge radius, so if you're struggling to deal with the primes, then packing a slam weapon can help quite a bit. I also want to talk about a few helmet abilities that really help out in this boss fight. I personally found Zata's Whisper to be incredibly effective, especially if used in tandem with a blast build, so that would be my top recommendation. Roar and Nourish are also both very good picks, with Roar also being great with blast builds. Nourish is especially useful, as it makes the limited energy you're granted go that much farther, and the viral status lets you run non-viral elements more comfortably, like Blast. Man, I am really shilling Blast in this video. Sentient Wrath is also surprisingly good, as its damage vulnerability debuff applies to Vanguard members as well as the Dactolysts. It's admittedly more niche than the other three, but it's definitely worth considering. This is an even more niche strategy, but you can also use Quiver to make yourself invisible, so long as you shoot your own Sentinel. This makes most bosses totally inert aside from a few attacks, so while it is pretty finicky, it is definitely effective. While not necessarily helmet abilities, Energy Nexus is very helpful if you're not using Xeneric, and Arcane Energize is great for making the limited energy orbs in these fights go much farther. Now, this is the strategy I personally relied on. Zata's Whisper for more damage, Scourge to prime enemies, Toxicist to deal damage, Praetos and Kareen for their utility, and Thara to nuke bosses as often as possible. Note that this is just what worked for me, and if you lack any of these tools, there's plenty that can work. Precision and crit weapons are generally very good in this fight, and many other Incarnates pack a solid punch. You're welcome to mimic my strategy if you want, but if that doesn't work for you, just remember my overarching advice. Focus on crit weapons and have some source of viral. Now, one of the most difficult aspects of this fight is actually surviving it. Attacks deal a lot of damage, and the magnetic procs can make shield gating a struggle. As such, I'm going to let you all in on the secret sauce that makes any frame borderline immortal: catalyzing shields. To explain why this mod is so broken, I first need to explain how shield gating actually works. So, put simply, shield gating works like this. When your shield breaks, there's a brief window where your health can't take damage. Shield quantity affects how long the invincibility is, and it varies quite wildly. The minimum shield gate duration is 0.33 seconds of invincibility, while the maximum is 2.5 seconds, which is achieved at 1,150 shields. Shield gating also takes into account your highest shield amount before your shields broke. To explain what I mean, say you have that maximum 2.5 second shield gate when your shields are full. Your shields don't have to immediately break from full for you to get that 2.5 second shield gate, but your shields do have to reach full at least once before they break. If your shields break and then start regenerating, but only make it halfway full before breaking again, then you'll only get 1.25 seconds of shield gating, as that's the highest value you reached before they broke again. You can tell if your full shield gate is ready by looking for this sort of energized effect on your shield bar, as it signals that your shield gate is fully charged. With that explained, let's look at catalyzing shields, which reduces shield capacity by 80% in exchange for a 1.33 second full shield gate duration. The idea behind this mod is pretty simple. Lower the player's shield quantity so it's easier for them to get their full shield gate. Here's what makes it broken though. The 1.33 second shield gate duration is always in effect, not just when your shields are full. This means that, if you gain even one shield point before they break again, you'll get the full 1.33 second duration. I'm reasonably certain this is a bug considering how the effect is worded on the mod card, but it's been the case for a long time, so I don't really expect them to fix it. If they do, you all better not blame me for it. I still live in guilt every day for the Drifter handshake thing. So catalyzing shields is great, especially in combination with mods like Brief Respite or the Augur set, as ability casts restore shields. But with energy being a limited resource in these boss fights, there's another method that I find even more effective: recharge delay reduction. By using both Fast Deflection and Vigilante Vigor, we can reduce our shield recharge delay to a measly 0.2 seconds, making our shield start recharging almost instantly. Shields don't naturally begin recharging until after shield gate invincibility is ended, but even so, that's an incredibly small window where you're vulnerable. The main weakness with this strategy is that magnetic procs do halt natural shield regeneration, which prolongs your vulnerability window, but once the effect wears off, your shields will recharge almost instantly. You can also take Arcane Nullifier to block the magnetic proc itself, which blocks the shield recharge penalty and keeps shields up almost 100% of the time. This combination of items, Arcane Nullifier, Catalyzing Shields, Fast Deflection, and Vigilante Vigor, makes you almost impossible to kill. The 0.2 second vulnerability window is so short that the only way you'll realistically die is if you're fast asleep or get exceptionally unlucky. There are still other survivability strategies I'm going to discuss, but know that this lineup is extremely powerful, even by itself. On the topic of shields, Arcane Aegis is also incredibly good in this fight, as it causes your shields to regenerate constantly while active. It isn't super reliable if you use Aegis exclusively, but in tandem with other forms of shield restoration, it can be a very valuable layer of redundancy. I also think it's important to bring up Rolling Guard, as its invincibility and status cleanse are super useful in this fight. You can use the invincibility window to stay alive while your shield gate is down, and the status cleanse can be used to save yourself from high damage heat procs like firewalls. The main issue with Rolling Guard is that I roll to dodge things all the time, so I put it on cooldown accidentally, but if that's not an issue for you, then it's very worth using. The nice thing about all of these strategies is that they can be used together, and while it is very expensive to do so, they also make you extremely safe. I also want to give one final nod to both Arcane Ice and Movement mods. Arcane Ice is extremely useful for avoiding vaporization by Firewall, and it also makes Ember's Inferno much less dangerous. Parkour shards, mods, and melees are also super helpful for dodging Firewall, and I highly recommend having at least one parkour boost to make clearing the attack easier. So, now that we've gone over all of the strategy, what do you actually get for conquering the Guilty? Well, after completing the node under any circumstances, you get two rewards: an Honoria and a Sumdali. The Honoria is called My Light Goes With You, and the Sumdali is the Mentor Ayatan Sumdali. This is the weird egg thing from the old Peace Quest, and while it doesn't look terrible, you just can't beat the tank's cannon. Like the other super bosses, the Guilty has a set of 6 accolade glyphs, which are rewarded for completing the mission solo with 6 specific Warframes. These frames are Ash, Ember, Caliban, Wisp, Oberon, and Noko. Once all 6 glyphs have been obtained, you'll receive a new title, Savior of Perita, which is probably the hardest title to obtain in the entire game. All of the general advice I mentioned earlier applies to these 6 frames as well, but if you need help with any specific glyph, I'm going to link a playlist in the description with commentated completions of each run. I'll show my builds, talk about my thought process, stuff like that, so if you need the help, you can find it down there. Do note that I won't actually be earning the accolade glyphs, as I already have them all, just to make sure you weren't confused as to why they don't show up. Each run of the mission will also grant you 10 Lyroic Bridges and 1 Dactolyst Arcane, but that's not really the point of all this. The Guilty isn't supposed to be a farming method to be optimized and exhausted, but a challenge to be battled and overcome. All of the super bosses have this mindset of being challenging over farmable, and I don't think it's a problem for the Guilty to follow that trend. I know a lot of people don't like that this mission grants little currency, but I feel like making it the optimal farming method goes against the entire point of making super bosses. The fun is in the challenge, and if you're playing to grind, then you probably aren't going to enjoy the experience. Alright, that's everything I wanted to say for this video. Be sure to check the pinned comment for any changes that might be made after this video releases. Also, if you've done this boss yourself, please reply to the pinned comment with the strategies that worked for you. Warframe is a vast game, and there are a ton of ways that this fight can be approached, so while I shared what's best for me, I want to crowdsource tactics that may work better for others. Beyond that, you can like and sub and all that nonsense. I don't really feel like wasting time with the YouTuber stuff if I'm honest. I've been recording this for over 2 hours. I am considering doing other super boss guides if there's interest, so let me know in the comments if that's something you'd want to see. I actually already made a guide for the Fragmented one, but it's tucked away near the end of the Analyzing the Murmur video, so I might turn that into a standalone thing as well. I'd also like to thank you very much if you've made it to the end of this video, because holy shit, this was so much longer than I expected. If you made it this far, comment Guilty Chair down below to let me know you're a real one. Also, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my channel members for helping to fund this content. This channel wouldn't continue to exist without them, so seriously, thank you. With all of that out of the way, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all next time when the Dactylists double team me until I explode. Why the fuck did I write that?